Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Andy. It's been a few months since I've done this, but we're going to come back and do some Python programming. So for those of you that are watching for the first time on YouTube or wherever you're coming from, like I said, my name is Andy. I do Python programming. I've been working for the last couple of months on writing a Python NES emulator. It's been a couple of months since I worked on that, so I'm not going to work on that today. I'm just going to come back and do a bit of a reintroduction to myself and get myself back into the habit of streaming just by doing something simple. Probably going to try and achieve that by just doing a short stream today of 2 or 3 hours to do, I don't know, I haven't quite figured it out yet. Create a game of some kind, I think. Gustle says, "Well, you're going to be late, I'm out of here." Fair enough. So yeah, my first step is going to be, let's walk through the process of creating something simple. In this instance, a game, and we're going to do it from scratch because we like to do things from scratch, so we can kind of follow the process through of what's going on. Yeah, have some fun with it. Cool. All right, so what do we have here? We have a blank Python project. We just have a single file called main.py, and we have a blank virtual environment. So for those of you not that familiar with Python, basically a virtual environment is going to be something you create on a per project basis that gives you a self-contained system where you can install Python modules. So it means that when you install different versions of things on different projects, they aren't going to clash with each other. So we start off with nothing. So what are we going to do today? We're going to make a simple game. So we're going to use a simple graphics library eventually to do that, probably called Pygame. But to start off, we're just going to sketch out what we want to do and kind of come up with some ideas for a game, and then see how we can implement that in a short time frame, say 2 or 3 hours. So let's do that. This is meant to say hello. Cool. So kind of starting off, we can see that we don't have anything going as of yet. So, kind of my initial thought of what I wanted to do was just a really simple project where we can do a really simple football manager style game. So for those of you that haven't played Football Manager, essentially you kind of pick a team, and they play matches for you, and you're not really directly involved in the playing, you do the management. So I'd really like to do a really simple version of that and see what we can do in 2 or 3 hours, and whether we can make that any fun. So kind of the core thing before you do any Python programming project is going to be scoping out what we want to do. And what we want to achieve with it. So what do we want with this? If we want a Football Manager type game, we want something where we can manage players. So hire, fire, look at stats. We want something that can play games with our players, where we don't necessarily have control, but the skill level and so on of our players has some kind of an effect on what the outcome of the game is. We want a season, we want a team, so we can see our progress over the state of the team. We can see whether the changes we're making are making a positive effect or making a negative effect. And yeah, we want some kind of visualization of that. Don't know how you spell that, but yeah. So at the start, we're going to probably just be using text, but eventually we want to be developing this into something that has some kind of graphics associated with it. Right. Let's start that then. So kind of drafting out what things we're going to need is always going to be helpful, because you kind of want to draft out what classes you're going to want, or if you're using database object, what database objects you want, so on and so forth. So classes. So we are going to be playing a manager. We're going to have a team, which is what we're going to be managing. A team is going to be made up of lots of players. The player is going to have skills. They're going to have a salary. There's going to be other teams. They're all going to play in a league, so we need to be tracking within the league who's winning and what's going on. And we need to be, I guess, playing a game in which players of the different teams are matched up against each other. Cool, so this is going to be our basis for what we end up doing. So let's go and start doing that. Oops, got a terminal up here. Cool, so if we bring this in as a comment into Python, so most Python projects that you start, you're going to start by doing a main statement. So you're going to be importing, you're going to have a main file, and you're going to start it by doing a if name equals main, then do something. So what this does for people that are new to Python is that it will, when this file is imported or run, it will run down line by line, and it will run each line of code, print B. So it'll run this line, it'll print A, print B, until it gets down to here. Now it'll only run this code if this is the initial file that you're running, if this is the main file that you're running. So really, instead of having this run these print statements run every time we import this file, really we want to put these in a function. So what happens here now is that these print statements will only be run if this is the primary file that we're running, not if we're importing it from a different file. Cool, so let's right click this and run. And we can say that we print A and that we print B. Cool, so we have a blank Python file that doesn't really do much, but that's perfect, that's what we want. Cool. What's going to be next? We want to start creating some of these classes, and we want to start kind of mocking up where all the logic for our game is going to go. So when I'm prototyping like this, I tend to create all the classes and create all the things that tie them together first, and then we're going to fill in the game logic as we go further. So let's start by saying that we know that the core concept of what we're going to be doing is managing a team. We're going to have lots of teams. So let's create a new file where we can manage some of this stuff. So I'm going to create a team file, and the team file is just going to have a class team, which at the moment is not going to do anything. Now this team class, so let's start putting some light documentation in. So a team has many players. A team has a ranking in a league. A team plays games against other teams. A team has a single manager. Now, what else have we got? Manage the team, league, players, game. Yeah, I think that's all of them. So what we're trying to do here is sketch out what the relationships between this class and all our other classes. So we know that a team contains many players, it has a single manager, so on and so forth. Now, if you've done any database work before, you'll kind of be familiar with some of these phrases. So a team having a single manager is going to be a single manager is going to manage a single team. So it's probably going to be a one-to-one relationship. A team has many players, so this is a many-to-one or a one-to-many relationship. Ranking in a league, so on and so forth. So you can probably be in multiple leagues, and in each one of them you have a rating. So it's probably going to be a many-to-many. But we're probably not going to do with databases here, so let's just keep going. So we've got manager, players. So let's create a manager class. Now we can separate these out to other things later on, other files later on if we do want to do that. But for now I'm just going to start putting them all in the same file. So a manager runs the team. Again, for those not familiar with Python, a pass statement is just essentially a no-op, so it just doesn't do anything. It just sits there and kind of fills in the space, since this is a white space managed language. Right, so what do we have? So we have players. So a team. So player is on a single team with many other players. And players play in a game for a team. Let's create a league. So a league has many teams that play in it, and each team is going to have a ranking within this league. Cool. Right on. Rock on. Rock on. All right, so we've kind of got our basic structure here. We're going to have a game class, which is going to plays a game between two teams. A game belongs to a league. Cool. So here's our main classes, and kind of we've sketched out the relationship that occurs between all of these. So we can kind of start filling out, even though we don't have anything in these, there's no logic in any of these, we kind of know from the comments what's going on and how they're all going to fit together. So I'm going to move this over to here, and then come back to here. I'm going to call this main. Right, so now what do we want to do? So this is going to be so when we start in the game for the first time, we need to run a setup phase. And what we do in our setup phase is we're going to need to create a lot of random players. We're going to need to create some random teams, some managers, and of which you're going to be one of those managers. You're going to play as one of those managers. And then we're going to start needing to run seasons, where we run game by game. Cool, so let's set up our data. So our kind of fundamental unit is going to be a player. And then we're going to have teams. Sorry, it's going to be a team which is going to have players run by a manager in a league, and they play games. So let's start off by setting up a single league, because that's our highest level thing. So we have a single league. So it's at this point that we start trying to figure out what data our league needs, for instance. So a league has many teams, but what else does a league have? A league needs to have a name, probably. So we do an init method. So again, for those of you not familiar with Python, the init method is what these double underscores are, I'll come to in a second. But your init method is your initializer, which acts kind of similar to a constructor. So it's where you do all your data initialization. And in Python, it's actually where you declare what variables the class is going to have. So for instance, in this example, in init, we want to declare that the league is meant to have a name, and we want to give it a name. We want to declare that it has many teams, and we want to either initialize those teams there, or we want to pass those teams into the league. So let's just start off by saying a name. So this is a basic example where we can just say self.name is going to be initializing a variable that belongs to a league object, is going to equal league1. Now this, make sure I'm not cutting off text here. Yep. This is something that we can also set according to a variable, or we can set according to a hard-coded thing like we've done here. All right. Cool. So I'm just doing some window management. So let's pass in a name. So now when we're initializing this, so the first league that we have is going to be equal to a league. And we've got to pass it a name. So in this case, let's call it the Premiership League, because I'm pretty sure that's a football thing. And by football, I mean soccer, for those people that would say it differently. Cool. So what does a league have? A league has many teams. So the two ways for doing that is that we can potentially pass data into it saying here are the teams that are part of this league, or we can get something where it initializes the teams internally. I think we should pass the teams in, because that way if you're between seasons you want to switch teams between leagues, you can pretty easily do that by just passing in a new set of teams. So let's persist the teams and say that a league is different. So let's start off by saying that the teams in this league are just going to be an empty list. We don't have any teams in this league. And let's add a teams thing where we can say self.teams. So this is kind of your getter setter style essentially that you might see in Java or something similar to that. There's not really any in Python, there's not any real advantage to doing this over accessing teams directly. If you're just doing a getter and a setter, there's no need to do that. The reason I like to do this is because I like to add kind of initial other logic around it, where we can say instead of just adding teams, we can say this is going to be set the teams for a season. So we can do this, but we could also make this method, for instance, finish the current season of the league. Right, so it's going to come in handy. We're going to do some initial logic, some other logic here later. Cool. All right, so we're going to set the teams. So teams. Now teams is not declared yet because we haven't made any teams. So this is the point where we say, all right, cool. Let's go up to teams and let's do a very similar thing here. So we're creating our constructor. A team is going to have a name. Cool. So let's set up our teams. Set up 5. Let's set up 5 teams. So I'm just going to think of 5 random teams off the top of my head. So we're just going to do some manual data population here. Now instead of doing this, it's probably easier to do sorry. Hang on a second. It's probably easier to chuck this in an array, because what we're doing here is creating 5 different teams. So we're going to want to be chucking them in an array eventually anyway, so we may as well do it now. Cool, so we're creating a team that's called Chelsea, we're creating a team that's called Man City, 4, 5. Arsenal, however you spell that. West Ham and Hull City. Cool. So there's 5 teams. Right. And now we've got our teams list, and then we're passing it into the league. Cool. Now a team is going to have many players, so self.players equals that. Now we're going to have to populate these players from scratch, from somewhere. So again, this kind of becomes our thing where we're going to generate some players. Now here, I don't want to manually do it like I did here because I want a lot of players. If you have 11 players on a team, and we have 5 teams, we're going to need at least 55 players, right? So I'm going to generate randomly a couple of hundred and then assign them randomly to those teams. Cool, players. So player plays in a single team. So what does the player need? Very similarly to everything else, it's probably going to need a name. Now, players are going to have rankings. So we're just going to say that they're going to sit in here when we create them. And they're going to need things like a salary. Cool. So let's think about how we can generate some players. So this is going to be a loop that runs 100 times, and I is going to be a different value every time. What we can use this to do is say players equals an empty list, and then say, all right, down in here, we're going to add a new player which we randomly generate. Generate player. And we're going to create a function called generate player. Right, so what does a generate player function need to do? It needs to return a new randomized player. Now, I think what I'm going to do now is chuck this logic into a different function, a different file, just to separate it out. Player. Let's give this bad boy a move. Cool. So we'll put the class player in here. What we'll also do is we'll add our helper functions in here, like generate player. And we can import that now. Cool. So this is going to return a player. And what does it need? It needs a name and some other kind of like skills and salaries. So let's start off by just saying the player is called Andy, right? What we want this to do is to generate a new random name any time that we call this function. So let's do that. So let's say first names, and let's generate a list of first names. And let's turn to generating some random data sets. Baby center, perfect. Sweet. Cool. Man, this would be really nice if I could copy from this kind of list. Let's see what happens if I do this. That's not so bad. So typically in Python, or PyCharm at least, if you put things inside of triple quotes like this, when you paste data in, it'll not mangle the formatting as much. Another tip in PyCharm is that you can do, if you hold down your middle mouse button and drag, it's going to allow you to do multiple line select. So we can just kind of like select all these things, chuck them out. And then if you hold down Control Shift and do, oh, right, no, it didn't work. There we go. Control Shift and right, then it'll allow you to go one word across. And we can just do some formatting like this, where we now have something that's formatted like a list. Oops, so here I've forgotten to put quotation marks. So let's go and do that. Quotation marks around everything. Nice. Now this would probably look a little nicer if they were all on one line. So let's kind of do that where we select everything, go to the right, do a delete, hope that I'm not breaking things. This isn't good. How about that? That looks still horrible, but oh my god. So this is where actually having something like Vim is going to make your life a little bit easier. Anyway, let's do this in Sublime just to make this a bit nicer. Selection. Let's just find all the tabs, delete them. Let's find all the spaces, stuff like that. So now we've got a reasonably well formatted list. Now we can do this. Cool, that looks a lot better. Doesn't look a lot better. I'm going crazy. Got enough by one error. There we go. Cool. And now we can just run the auto formatter, reformat code, which should chuck it. Cool. And we're actually, instead of doing last names, we're just going to give them 2 first names, because why not? We're going to use the Python standard library here. So a lot of the Python standard library has really cool functions. So for instance, the random function, a lot of the random functionality has really cool stuff. We can do like choices from a list and pick interesting things. So if we import random, I believe there's a random.choice function. Now if you look at the random.choice function, let's pull up documentation for it. Python random choice. I find that the Python standard docs are typically not that great. Choice, here we go. So this returns a random element from a non-equals empty sequence. So we should just need to say random.choice first names. We can say that whatever it picks is going to be our first name, and our last name is going to be also from our first names. And therefore our full name. Now we're going to use some string formatting here. Just for those that haven't seen the string formatting format before, you put in these curly brackets where you want to insert a variable. You type dot format at the end and then you put in. So we're going to put in first name, last name. So what this is going to do is if our name is Emma Liam, it's going to say Emma space Liam is that full name. Nice, 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 nice. Okay, so we now have a way to generate a player who's going to have a random name. And now in here, we can do some random skill stuff. So let's kind of do for now, let's just say they have a single skill rating, which again, we're going to use a random function. Now, kind of what I want to do here is be able to pass in the parameters. So if we did want to manually create a player, we could do that. So instead of setting it randomly in here, let's create it in our generate player function. And let's say salary. So I got full name, generate their skill and salary. And let's make these kind of correlated to each other for now. So skill is going to equal somewhere from 0 to 100. And really, we kind of want it to be something like they can go from 10 to all the way to 100. so that no one can have like a skill of 0. Just seems smart. And your salary is going to be somewhat correlated to your skill. So if we're dealing in dollars here, let's say that, you know, their starting salary is going to be $50,000. I have no idea what a soccer player gets paid. Plus their skill times 100. So if you kind of think about this, if they're on the lower end of the skill, then it's going to add $10,000, and if they're on the upper end of skill, it's going to add $100,000. So buying better skilled people is probably going to be worthwhile for now, but we can kind of adjust this formula later. Now the other way of doing this is, instead of passing this in, we could make this a function on player and make salary a function, which I think is what I'm going to do. So I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to give them a skill, and then we can generate the salary. Salary. Now, if you do it like this in a function, you can also use things like recent form or what team they play for to adjust what their salary is going to be, which is kind of cool, right? So for the moment, we'll just return, like I said, 50,000 plus self dot skill times 100. Cool. All right. So we're going to generate 100 random players. Now these teams are going to be, sorry, what am I trying to say? These teams need to have players, so we're going to give them 11 random players to start off with. Now we've already got our players, so knowing that we have these 5 teams that don't have anyone on their bench, let's do that. So for team in team, so for every team we want to give them their players. So selected player equals, we're going to come back to the random function here. We're going to say it's a random dot choice of the players. And we're going to say team dot players dot append. Give me a second. Cool. So we're going to append the selected player. So they've essentially drafted that player. Now, once the player's been drafted by another team, we don't want them to be playing for any other team. So let's say that selected player is removed from the player pool. And now when we choose another player from player, it'll be choosing from a restricted pool. Cool. So another thing that we'd probably want to do here is, instead of doing this manually like this, I kind of like to chuck these kind of operations into functions. So when we say team.players.append selected player, really what we're saying is that a player is being set to play for a team. So we can put that information in a function on the team, or we can put that information on the player, right? Because they're both involved in that transaction of being selected to play for a team. Which is kind of up to us. So I'm going to put that on the, well, for now I'll leave it here, but potentially we could move it later. Cool. So if we get down to here, every team should have, for team and teams, give them 11 starting players. Right. So we need to do a for player number in range 11. Give them 11 starting players. Cool. Premiership League is part of the teams. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to run this down to here. I'm going to see if anything crashes, and you know, something did, obviously. What is that error? Random int random int requires two things, a lower and an upper. Selected player dot remove. It should be players. Oops. Players dot remove selected player. So we want to remove the player that we drafted to from the total list of players. Cool. 2 errors. That's not too bad. So we should have a league which has a list of teams. The league at the moment should have 5 teams, and each one of these teams should have 11 players. And each one of these players should have a skill and a name. Yeah, that looks, round right. Nice. Cool. So let's keep going. So a manager runs a team. We probably don't need to come back to that now. What we want is first league dot set teams. What we want now is to kind of run something where we run a set of games and we can see the state of the league. So the league is going to have a ranking, or potentially it should. Basically, we want each team to have an attribute of like how many games it's won and how many games it's lost this season, and then we can use that to generate our ladder, right? And we can use that, we'll update that when we play games. So a team is going to have a wins. Now these are going to be reset between each different season, but that's fine. We can get some logic that's going to do that. Alternatively, you could do this in a smarter way where you could, in database terms, have a different table, but we ain't gonna do that. Won't generating the skill overwrite whatever you pass as a parameter? Do I generate the skill? Yeah, so if I did generate this, sorry, I hadn't read the chat in a bit. If I did generate the skill, it would, in here, it would overwrite whatever I pass as a parameter, but since I generated it out here and do pass it in as a parameter, then it's not going to get overwritten. The salary is going to be generated dependent on whatever the skill is, but that's kind of what we want. Cool. Okay. No, it's fine. Ask questions. That's the entire point of doing this. I'm trying to do this. I tend to do this kind of stuff from reasonably first principles where I can. But obviously sometimes, it can be hard to follow even doing that. But just let me know. If you want something explained, I'm happy to answer. Okay. Cool. Right, so what were we doing? So we got a league. We kind of want to be like winning games and losing games, stuff like this. So let's say a league can play a season. So what's a season going to be? A season is going to be a collection of games. We can define the game length, but for now we can say, hey, we've played 10 games in a row or whatever. So play 10 games between all our teams. So we're going to play 10 games. What is playing 10 games going to do? We're going to create for every, so instead of 10 games, 10 rounds. It's probably going to be easier if we have 6 teams, isn't it? For now, so I don't have to deal with like buys or anything. Man City and what's the other team? Swansea. Cool. So let's play 10 games between all our teams. And really what we want to be doing is playing 10 rounds. So each round is going to have many games. 3 games or 2. And we're just going to do like random matching. So you might end up playing the same teams a couple of times, but to be honest, let's make it as easy as possible. So self.playRound Now, there's nothing wrong, I think, with doing something like this, where you kind of chain methods down. So you can kind of see here is what we're saying is that we're going to play a season, and all play season is going to do at the moment is just going to play 10 rounds. And then we've come down to the round function, and all the round function is going to do is play, 3 games between each team, right? So it's kind of a bit overkill. Instead of doing this, you could just say, hey, play 20 games. But I kind of like the way where you kind of logically approach it of saying, play a season, play a round, play a game. Hopefully that makes sense. So play a round, which is 3 games. Now at the moment, the amount of games will change on how many teams you have in the league, but that's fine. So for game number in the range of self.teams. So really the number of teams that we have is going to be the length of number of teams. Again, for those not familiar with Python syntax, len will get you the length of something. So in this case, it'll get us the length of how many teams we have, which is 6 teams. Therefore, the number of games that we need to play is going to be the number of teams divided by 2. In Python 3, maybe in Python 2 as well, not sure. Double division just means do an integer division. So the example would be, if I open up the Python console here, you can kind of see that if I do 3 divided by 2, it's going to equal 1.5. This is Python 3 does float division by default, whereas if you do this in Python if you do this in Python 2, it will return 1. 3 divided by 2 will return 1, which is kind of behavior that surprises a lot of people. So in Python 3, it does what you'd expect and does the float division. If you want to do integer division, you do double division signs. Hopefully that makes sense. Not a big deal if it does not. Let's just check that I'm not blocking this out with the camera. Cool. So for game number in the number of games, we want to play a game. So how do we do that? So we're going to create a game object for each one of these. Let's just move this up here. We're going to be creating a game object, and what is a game going to be? A game is between 2 teams and it belongs to a league. So when we are creating a game, we have two teams that we're going to play and a league. So we'll pass in a league, we'll pass in a home team and an away team. And we'll just do some kind of pretty basic stuff here, where we just assign variables to all the things that we're passing in. Nice. So creating a game, we've got to pass in a league, which is ourself, and then we've got to pass in 2 teams. Now, what we want to do is in each round is very similar to before. We want to have each team only playing once, right? So we're going to use random do a choice because that's kind of how we get things done. So teams to play, self.teams, teams to, and then down here we're going to do home team equals, God, let me think about this. So the home team is going to be a random choice from the teams to play, and the away team is going to be a random choice from teams to play. Now we're going to need to modify this list and remove the home team from it between each of these things. Home team, away team. Cool. So if we actually play a season now, and I'm going to put a breakpoint in here. I just want to check teams to play dot remove home team. If I do this, is this a destructive operation? Let me just quickly check this out. Yeah, it is. So in Python, when you're dealing with lists are going to be they're by reference. This is going to be a difficult one to explain, but basically what it's saying is that when you operate on a copy of a list, it's going to, if you delete something from that new list, it's going to modify the original list unless you explicitly copy it like this. So now when we do this, soft.teams is still going to have 6 teams on it. Cool. Anyway, there's just kind of that's a small Python implementation thing of be careful when you're dealing with lists. If you're removing things from a list, that you're not operating on the original list. You want to be operating on a copy. So what we want to do is say that the home team is a random choice from all the teams to play, and then the away team is a random choice from all the teams to play, and that means that they can't play anymore. Cool. So they're going to play, we're going to create a game, and then we'll call, game.play or something, which is going to be a function that we create on the game itself. Let's create a function in here. For now, it's not going to do anything. All right. Now, really, what do we want the game to do? So we want the game to kind of run and simulate which team is going to win, but we also want it to return the result. And we want it to either update the home team, the winning team and the losing team with either a win or a loss, ideally. So what I will want it to do is actually return who won, the home team or the away team. So I want it to play the game and then return who won. Return who won. And I'm going to say that true means the home team won. False means the away team won. Now we could change this later on to make it return the, the goals that were scored in the game and stuff like this, but for now, that's fine. So let's say that the home team is always going to win for now. And say that the winner equals that. Right. So down here in the league, what we're going to see is, so if the winner is the home team, we want to do something. And otherwise, away team won. Ooh. So if the home team won, then we want to say home team dot wins plus equals 1. Away team dot wins plus equals 1. Home team dot losses plus equals 1. Right, so, we kind of just have a pretty basic thing where we say, if the home team wins, they get a win, the away team gets a loss, otherwise the other way round. Cool, what do we want to do now is that we kind of want to, when we're running this, is we want to get a feeling for what's going on, right? And so the way that we do that is we're going to start just scattering, later this will be done with graphics or something, but we want to start scattering print statements around or logging statements around that tell us what's happening. So we've got our teams. When we're playing around, right, we kind of want to say for each game num, we want to say who's playing who and what was the result. And so we're going to do that in the game. So I'm going to do that in the initialization and say that, and do it using these format statements. We're going to be saying that home team is playing the away team. self.home team, self.away team. Boom. Okay, so we're watching a home team versus an away team, and when the game is played, we're going to say play begins. Stuff is going to happen in here. Game ends. And we're going to return who won. Print. For now, the home team is always going to win. Nice. Return true. So now, when we play a season, let's see what happens. Cool. Now, these team names are not particularly descriptive. So, why is this? So, in Python, when you print an object, what it does is it returns the string representation of that object. And at the moment, that's like a memory location on what type of object it is. And really, that's not very useful, right? So kind of what we want the team to look like when we print out in the console is whatever its team name is, so Chelsea or Arsenal or whatever. So the way you do that in Python is by using these double underscore methods. So what are double underscore methods in Python? They're special methods that relate to the class itself and the underlying Python structure. So for instance, when we overwrite underscore underscore or dunder, say double underscore, dunder, we're overriding the initialization function, so we can initialize variables. When we overwrite the string function, underscore underscore string underscore underscore, we can make it return self.name, for instance. And now when we run this again, you can see that now the string representation of this class actually just returns the team name. So it's Swansea versus West Ham. Right, so print season begins. And at the end of the season, we want to write season ends. And we're going to do the same thing here, just so we can get a kind of an idea of what's happening. Round beings. Round beings do exist, I suppose. Round ends. Hopefully that makes sense. Cool, so let's run this again. Let's see what happens. So, season begins, round begins. We've got Arsenal versus Chelsea, and the home team wins. We got Man City versus Hull City, and the home team wins. What a surprise. Cool, so what we kind of want to do now is start making this a little bit more based on the skills of the teams, rather than just randomly saying that the home team wins. So how do we do that? So that's going to be a bit of logic on the team class and a bit of logic on the game class, where it's going to kind of compare those ratings. And to do that, we need the team to have a rating. To have the team to have a rating, we need to look at all its players' ratings, cumulatively sum them, and say, for now, that's a really simple thing of the team rating. Cool. What I also want to do is make this function a bit nicer. And really what I want to happen is, in a league, we want to say, hey, here's the home team and here's the away team, and we want the game to resolve itself, and we want to, instead of having this logic here, we want to have something where we can say def resolve, resolve the game, where we get passed in a finished game. We can look at the results and we can update the league standings based on that, right? So that's where I want this code to go. So if game dot home team won, then the game's home team should get a win, you know, so on, so forth. Whoa. So we're going to play the game. What level of code would you classify this project? Is this more an intermediate project? That's a good question. Yes, definitely. I suppose it depends how you define intermediary. So I'd say if you are new or new-ish to programming, to Python and to programming, then this is definitely an intermediate project and is definitely going to be a stretch. I mean, hopefully you'll learn some stuff, because I'm kind of trying to explain what's happening, but you're going to get, if you don't understand the core concepts of programming, it's going to be difficult. If you're coming from another language and you're looking to pick up Python, for instance, this is probably reasonably approachable. So yeah, I would say this is an intermediate project where if you don't have coding experience, it's probably going to be reasonably difficult to follow along. I think hopefully that explains that answer, maybe. For instance, I'm not really explaining like what a class is or what functions do and, variables, so on and so forth. So I'm kind of skipping over a fair amount of assumed knowledge about programming fundamentals and just trying to walk through my thought process of what I do when I'm programming and when I'm literally making this up as I go and just trying to talk through like why I'm doing what I'm doing. But definitely for an intermediate kind of audience. But, hopefully you're enjoying it. Maybe. Alright, where was I? Cool, so we're playing a game and then we're going to say self.resolve the game with the game that was just played. Nice. Yeah, that's fine. So, it does, thanks. Yeah, no problem. Avatar. Play. I do feel like I'm following along. I think this helps me an idea of where I stand as a student. Yeah. I mean, in terms of code complexity, there's nothing too crazy in this. I'm using, classes, functions, variables are pretty much and a bit of the standard library. So I think it's really good in that way, in that we're not really using any external libraries. It's all just pure Python code. But yeah, hopefully that helps to some extent. Cool, so what do we want to do in the play? So when the game is played, we kind of want to determine the skill ratings of the two teams, and we want to see which one wins. So really, instead of the home team winning, really what we want is if the self.home team's rating is greater than the self.away team's rating, then the home team wins. And we're going to say that the self.winner equals true. Home team won. Self.home team 1 equals none. And else. Cool. So if the home team's rating is better than the away team's rating, then the home team should win. Otherwise, the away team should win. Now, obviously, we want to later put in actually playing the game and maybe have a bit more than just which team's rating is higher wins the game. But for now, this kind of serves as a bit of a good approximation. False. All right. And we want, something to happen between insert game here. I guess we'll come back to that. All right. Yeah, this looks good. So what do we want to do now? So here's where this cool string formatting comes in handy, right? Because if we look at this log, we can kind of see that who's playing. It's going to be Arsenal versus Chelsea. But whichever team wins depends on their skill rating, right? So instead of just writing Arsenal versus Chelsea, we can modify their string function to return not only their name, but whatever their rating is. Now, we don't actually know what their rating is at the moment. But, let's figure it out. So I'm going to do string formatting here again with their name and their rating. So we're going to add their name, and then next to that, we're going to write their rating. I'm going to make their rating a function. And that way, when we come back up here, we can say, what is the rating of the team that we're following. So how do we do that? All right, well, we know that they should have 11 players. So let's say that self dot, so let's say our rating equals 0 for player in all our players. We're going to sum up what their ratings are. So rating plus equals self dot, whatever their skill, the player's skill is. Cool. And we're going to return rating. So now if we change our players around, this thing will update. All right. If players.rating instead of writing home team wins, what we can also say is whatever team is actually the home team is going to win by inserting their string. And that'll make it a little bit nicer. Right, so round begins. We've got Swansea, 674, playing Arsenal, 509. And Swansea wins. West Ham, 722, playing Hull. West Ham wins. Man City playing Chelsea. Man City wins. So on, so forth. Season ends. Cool, so at the end of the season, well actually let's do it at the end of the round, right? When the round ends, let's do a ladder status. Whoop. So it prints out the status of the ladder. So for team in self.teams, print, you know, some things. Format with the team and then their position. Cool, so how is a ladder meant to be sorted? You want to sort by the team's wins and by the team's losses, right? So each team has got a wins and a losses variable. Now at the moment we're just going to look at the wins variable, and we're going to do something in Python which is use their sort functionality. So the sort functionality is pretty cool because what it allows you to do is say self.teams.sort. Now there are two kind of ways to do this. One is to say .sort, which is going to sort the original list, which is not really what we want to do. So there are two types of sorting. One where you modify the original list, and one where you just return a new version of the list and use that in your whatever function you got. So .sort is going to be a destructive thing, so it's going to sort the original list, which is not really what we want to do. So instead what we want to do is use this sorted function, which just does it by copying the list and then sorting it. So how do we sort a list? So you pass in the list and then you pass in a key which says, how do I want to compare the items in this list? So how do I know that one item is meant to be closer to the top of the list or closer to the bottom of the list? And we do that by passing in the key. So what this said, now this is where it moves away from intermediate programming. So what this is telling us is this lambda t says for each team we want to sort it and we want to use the variable t to represent each team. So here we want to compare their wins and say whoever's got the most wins, the team that's got the most wins is going to be the one that's at the top of the list, and the team with the least wins is going to be the one at the bottom of the list. Cool, and we want to save the team, and we want to save the second part of it is going to be how many wins they've had. So you can see that string formatting kind of gives us a way to really easily say, hey, Arsenal has 7 wins, right? A lot easier than trying to like add strings together or concat them and stuff like that. Right, so ladder. Cool. So Chelsea wins. Arsenal wins. Man City wins. So we should see, it's sorted in reverse, but we should see that Arsenal, Man City and Chelsea are on the top of the ladder and these boys are on the bottom, which is what we expect. So let's run that again and let's see what the ladder looks like at the end of the season after we've played all these games. So after 10 rounds, Swansea has had 10 wins, which makes sense because they've got the highest rating. Man City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Hull, West Ham. So you can kind of see that it does what we expect in that there are 10 rounds. Swansea's won 10 times because they're the best team, and West Ham has won no times because they're by far the worst team. Cool. So what we've got now is the basic structure for a game where a league is played. It plays 10 rounds, and the games are determined based on a pretty simple metric, which is whoever's got the higher cumulative player skill. So now we're around an hour in, and we've got the basis for what our game is going to be. So let's spend the next hour turning this into something where you can have some kind of impacts, right? Where you can manage a team, you can look at your players, you can trade for other players, and then you can, try and influence it and see if you can end up at the top of the ladder by the end of a season. Right. So I guess my point is we've now got the framework for a season that will automatically play itself. Cool. So we're a manager. So I'm going to move a manager class to another thing. New class file. Manager. Boom. So a manager is going to run a team. So we're going to have a team that we can. Oops. So when we initialize, we're going to pass in a team that we can play. That we control. I should maybe be a better term. So after team equals team. So we're only going to have one manager, which is ourselves. But for instance, if we did want to, expand this later on, you could turn it into something where you could have many managers that can control different teams throughout their life cycle, and they get to assign different teams, whatever. The entire point of doing it like this with classes where they'll relate to each other is that it can be extendable later on if you did want it to be. But we're not going to extend it because, we're lazy. Right. So which team do we want to coach? Yeah, great question. We're going to coach a random team. So let's create the manager. For now, there's only going to be one manager, which is going to be controlled by us, and we're going to have a random team. So the manager is going to equal a manager. And the team is going to be random.choice from teams. Nice. So now when we're playing the season, really what we want to do is between each round, so after each round, we kind of want to give the manager an opportunity to change the team, right? So instead of playing 10 rounds all at once and not doing anything else in between, really what we want to do is take this function out here, and then we can kind of do it outside of the realm. We kind of want the concept of a season to be separate of the league now that we think about it, so that we can do other things like let the manager control it. Team manager. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's probably a good point. CGI collector of trying not to name your class's manager, because it's like the most overused word in programming. So that's a good point. Alright, so cool. So we want to get rid of this. Instead of playing a season out here, we kind of just want to do this. Cool. So let's say the first league is going to play the round. Now really what we could do here is if we have many leagues, every league will play around here. And so it kind of makes sense to not associate playing a season with a league, but with the overall kind of system. Right. So what do we want to do? We want to play the first round, and then we want to give the manager a chance to change everything. In reality, what we actually want to do is give the manager a chance to play anything, and then play a round, give him a chance to play, yada yada. Okay, so when we create a team manager, print, you are a manager. Nice. You manage, insert team name here. Good luck. We'll be nice to our players when they're beginning. Try and win the league. Now this is going to be really easy if we start off with the most skillful team, but it might be hard if we don't. Okay, so we create a manager. So manager dot, I don't know, what's the manager going to do every week? Manage. That's what I would do if I was a manager. Team manager. So they've got a manage function. So before every round, we can make changes as a manager. Right, so what are the kind of things that we want to be able to do as a manager? We want to be able to look at our current roster. We want to be able to look at what players are available. We want to be able to make changes to our team, so on and so forth. So, and this is where the team having a salary is going to come into play, and you know, all this kind of stuff. So, so if the average player is getting paid around $100,000, which is what is happening in this world, let's say that we have a transfer budget of, I don't know, for now, let's say $200,000. So really what we want is a team to have some money, right? And it's going to start off with, if we're playing 10 games in a season, each player is getting paid $100,000. That's going to be around $1 million a season. So let's say that we have $1 million in the bank. And really what I want is each player to have a weekly, so let's divide all these things by 100. By 10. So you're getting paid somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000 a week, and the team starts off with $1 million. Now every week we want to take away from this money how much money the team earns. So pay players. So for player, oops. Whoa, why did I just do that? Self.money minus equals how much money each player cost. Player.salary, salary, which I believe is a function. Yep. So what we need to make sure that we do is that we're not going to go over our salary cap, right? Now, ideally, when we win games, we should earn more money and stuff like that. But for now, we're just going to start with a fixed amount of money. We want to pay our players after every round, I assume. Probably. So let's say that's in the resolution of the game. So if we win, we'll get paid a certain amount of money, and then after we get paid, we can say game.hometeam. Pay their salary, and then the away team's going to pay their salary as well. White space. What a time to be alive. Didn't I call that function pay? Pay players, right. Cool. So what do we want to do in our manager thing? Let's assume that before every round, let's print some information about our own team, like how much money our team has left. And let's just make sure that we have some blank space around this so we can see what's going on. Print your team is this. And we also want to see what their rating is. So print, you have this many wins out of this many games. Dot format self.team.wins. And how many games do we have? To know how many games we have, we need to see how many, what the league is. Say self.league equals league. Self.league dot rounds played. So I'm kind of going a bit quick here, but I'm just trying to get into the get back into my groove of what's going on. So hopefully this makes sense of what we're doing here, where we're just starting to format things and say we're printing how many wins our team is going to have, and then we're also going to print how many rounds the league has played. We don't know how many rounds the league has played, so let's add a round played variable, and then every time they play a round, self.rounds played plus equals 1. Your lack of Pep 8 disturbs me. It's reasonably Pep 80, I think. Maybe? Reformat code. 3 lines reformatted. I think it's Pep 8, unless you're talking about this. So PyCharm has some really good like auto, what do you want to call it? Auto formatting stuff, code, reformat code, auto optimize, import, stuff like this, which kind of allows you to come back and pretty easily pep8 something post doing it. There's 79 character line endings. Wait, this one? Potentially. Yeah, so anyway, Skullmaker. Have a Pep 8 fight. I'm ready. Cool, so what else do we want to do? So we want to say we have this many wins, and we want to say how much money your team has. You currently have X dollars. Self.team.money. Right-eo. Now in Manage, this is where we're going to start presenting some menu options to the player and doing stuff like that. Cool, a lot of text. All right, you're our manager. You manage Chelsea, who is rated 604. Nice, Jose Mourinho. All right, your team is Chelsea. You have 0 wins out of 0 games, and we have $1 million. The round begins. We are playing Arsenal, and we win. Unsurprisingly. Cool, so your team is Chelsea 604, you have 1 wins out of 1 games. You currently have $988,000. Right, interesting. I would have thought that we would have less money than that. These should be like that, shouldn't they? Right, we have $1 million. We now have 877. All right, so we're spending too much money. So you can see that we're going to end up on less than 0 money after this season. So we should code in where if we go below 0, then we lose. But we also want to, get money if we win and stuff like that. Cool. All right, so at this point, let's start adding in some actual things that we can do here. Right, so what do we want our menu options to be? We're just going to do this in a pretty simple way where it's just going to be a command line. It's going to print out like a 1, 2, 3, do a raw input, and then do an input, and then kind of turn that into what your choice is. So what do we want our choices to be? I'm going to do a function that's just going to print a menu here, just so I can kind of separate that out from the status stuff, and we can pick and choose what we want to display. Is typically something that's helpful to do. So let's say print 1 is going to be an option is view your team players. And let's say for now that's the only thing that we can do. And input and number 2 is going to be continue on, play the next round. Right, so what are we going to do here? Now I'm going to do something fun, which is fun in Python, which is abuse dictionaries. So dictionaries are going to allow us to turn what we enter into proper output. I don't know if that makes sense. It's going to allow us to map our input into commands, what we want to happen. Right, so what I'm going to do is self.inputs. So the things that we can do are, if we enter a 1, then we want it to do something, which is view our team players. So self.view players, and we're going to make it a function. Players. And 2 is going to be self.next round. And you can kind of see this is going to allow us to build a pretty easy, easy input menu where we can correspond input into what actions we want to take. Ooh, so what's next round going to do? It's going to print next round, and then it's going to play. All right, so self.finished equals false. So while we're still making selections in the menu, so while we're not finished, we want our selection to be that. And then we want to map whatever the selection is to our inputs. So self.inputs into selection. So here's where it gets fun. So we kind of want to say, so if you write the number 1 or the number 2, it's going to map that back to inputs and then say, is that a 1 or a 2? And it's going to call the appropriate function. Ideally, we get to see a list of players sorted by skill and are up for trade. Yeah, absolutely. Hello. Fuckers VIP. Hello. Yeah, I agree, Scummaker. So that's kind of going to be the next step, is turning these into proper menu items as opposed to just placeholders that just print players. But let's see if we can get our input section working first. So we've got inputs, so we can either view players or go to the next round. What's the next round going to do? It's going to set self.finished equal to true, so we don't get any more input. Whereas players just means that we can make another selection after we see the list of players. Nice. Cool. And since it returns a function, we're going to have to call it as a function. So this line, do some dodgy things. Smiley face. Is this a tournament system? I guess that depends how you define a tournament system. At the moment, I just pick like a random choice of teams to play each other in each round. So no, it's not really. There's no like predetermined who's going to play who or anything. It's just like randomly select teams to play against each other because I'm lazy. So you might end up playing against the same team twice in a row, hypothetically, but I guess that could be worse. Cool. All right, so we're gonna, depending if we pick 1 or 2, then we're gonna pick the appropriate action. Now, if it's not 1 or 2, this thing's gonna error out, which is not really what we wanted to do. So, we're gonna say the action that we pick is going to be either 1 or 2, and we're going to say if we use, instead of using square brackets, so basically if you're working with a dictionary and you use square brackets in Python, so I'm going to give you an example of this. So if we say our dictionary, Cameron, hello Cameron, joined around 40 minutes ago, that's awesome, just watching, hope you're enjoying it. How much time do you have to complete this project? I mean, however long that I want, really. I mean, I'm hoping to put in maybe like an hour or more so today and just see what we can get it to. The idea being that I want to kind of prove, well, not prove, but just show what you can do in, 2.5 hours if you set your mind to it and kind of work with Python. And what I think is the really fun about Python is the ability to take a project like this from starting from scratch into turning it into, might not be the most amazing game in the world, but something that's semi-functional in, the space of 2 or 3 hours. And then if we want to, if it turns out to be fun and we want to come back to it and like keep developing it, then you can obviously, we can spend more time on it and pick it up. CGI collector. Cool, so dictionaries. How do dictionaries work in Python? So I'm hoping that you can kind of read this. The text is a bit smaller because I pump up the text size up here. But if we have a dictionary, where we say that 1 is mapped to the word Andrew, 2 is mapped to the word Billy. Cool. So in Python, if you use square brackets to access a dictionary, to access the keys of the dictionary, now I'm kind of assuming that people know what dictionaries are, but if you don't, it's just a way of mapping something to another. So here we're saying the number 1 corresponds to the string Andrew, and the number 2 corresponds to the string Billy. So if I say our dict 1, it's going to look through it and say, all right, that corresponds to Andrew, and returns Andrew. And if I type in number 2, it's going to return Billy. Now if I type in number 3, there's no 3 in this original dictionary, so there's nothing to map it to, so it returns an error and says, hey, I don't know what to do. The cool thing about Python is it allows you to say, instead of using the square brackets, you can just say .get, right? So if you say .get1, it's going to return Andrew. Get2, it's going to return Billy. And if you say get3, it's going to return nothing because 3 is not in there. And what it means is that you can choose what it returns if the key is not in there. So if we return get 1, and then if you can't find anything, return none. When we check for 1, it'll return Andrew. And when we check for 3, instead of erroring out, it will just return none. You're doing an awesome job with this project, by the way. It looks quite good. Awesome. Thank you very much, Cameron. It's, just kind of, it's been a couple of months since I've streamed, so I'm just trying to get back into it and get back into the habit of coding and talking about it and doing this kind of stuff before I kind of kick it up again. So, yeah, I just kind of spent around 5 minutes before thinking about what I wanted to make and said, hey, I reckon I could make something like this in a couple of hours and see where we go. So I haven't really thought about this. So if I'm kind of, making things up as I go, I apologize for that. Cool. So the action that we want is actually going to be either the viewPlayers method. And so again, this is kind of a Python thing. If you're coming from another language, this might not be as obvious, but functions are what we call first-class objects. So what is a first-class object? It just means it's something, I don't actually know the technical definition of a first-class object, but it's something that you can pass around as you would a variable, right? So for instance, this is a method, self.viewPlayers, but we're just passing it around as if it was a variable. and we can store it, and we can pass it through a function, and we can do all these things, and then afterwards we can call it, and it will just call the function. So we're kind of abusing that fact to make our input selection really easy. Right, so self.inputs.get the int of selection. So if we enter 1 here, it's going to say go up to this array and return the self.viewPlayers method, and then we call the viewPlayers method. Now, if action is none, then we want to say print, invalid selection. Right. If action is none. Ignore that. PyCharm doesn't know what's going on. Right, so let's give that a shot. So we manage Arsenal, whose skill rating is 523. We haven't played any games and we have $1 million. Let's print self.print menu. We manage Manchester City. All right, so we can view our team players or we can play the next round. So let's start by viewing our team players. And it did what we wanted, which is print the word players, as you can see down here, and then send us back and allow us to make another selection. So, I'm just going to be adding random prints in here so we can kind of give it a better thing, but make a selection. I want to view our team players. Let's do this again. View our team players. Here it would print our list of team players. Let's play the rest. If we enter an invalid selection, none type is not callable. Oops. That didn't work, did it? If action is none, print invalid selection. Oh, right, okay. Else. So we don't want to, So we only want to call the action if the action is not none. So if it's a real thing. So if we enter 4, invalid selection, or A, can't do it. Yeah, whatever. Let's assume that we enter an integer. All right, we want to play the next round. So we enter the number 2. Boom. So what team are we coaching? Whoa. So we want to reset the finish variable between each round. So let's play the next round. We're West Ham. We're 686. We're feeling pretty good. Boom. So what has happened? The next round is played. Where are we playing? West Ham versus Arsenal. We actually have the same rating. So whoever wins is kind of going to be random. We win. I guess because internally we were created before Arsenal was created. Awesome. So we won a game. So we have 1 win out of 1 games, and we can see that we have $876,000. So we're actually bleeding $123,000 a week. So we're obviously going to run out of money before the end of the season. So we're going to have to start selling some players to kind of get that budget under control. So this is where we're going to need to be able to view our team players and make it into the next round, so on and so forth. Cool. So that seems to be working. We've now got a really dodgy menu section and we can see what's happening. So what do we want to be able to do? We want to be able to view the players of our own team. We want to be able to view market. So what players are on the market. And really this view market thing should probably allow us to buy players as well, or sell players. And yeah, next round, good enough. So view the players on the market. View market. Market. All right, so viewing the players. Let's create this function because there's no reason that we can't do it. So for player in self.players, self.team. So for every one of our team players, we want to print out information about that player. All right, that makes sense. So let's see what happens when we view our team players. List is not callable players. Cool, we print out 10 of these object representations. So this is kind of something I went to in before, what Python does. It tries to print out the string representation of an object. So when the string representation is just isn't defined, it tries to print out like the memory location and stuff like that, which isn't particularly helpful to us, right? So what do? So we go to the player object, player, and we say, all right, we want to override the string functionality of this. And we want it to return something that's useful about the player. So let's assume that we want to return their name. We're going to use string formatting again. This is something that I've kind of talked about before, but we can do this. And then we also want to rate their skill and their salary. So let's say name, skill, and salary. Self.name, self.skill, self.salary. Nice. So now when we print out a player, it's going to allow us to look at their name, their skill, and their salary. What players do we have? Cool. So we have Ethan, who's an 80, 13,000 salary a week. So on and so forth. So, you know, we kind of want to be looking at players that are around 10,000 a week on average. If we want to stay under budget. Now this is obviously going to change when we start earning money and so on, but you know, we can figure it out. Nice. Okay. Cool. So this looks promising. We get a nice list here of who our players are and who our best players are. 83, 86. They're all pretty good actually. 87. This is why we're rated 723 and we're going to be blowing our budget. So we're actually going to need to sell some of these players. Right, so let's play the next round. And we should probably... Oh my god, Chelsea's even better than us. Damn. Okay, so we lost. Alright, cool. Let's assume that... what was I going to say? Team manager. Let's assume that this is fine and we can look at our players and we can decide what decision we want to make. We want to look at the market. So how are we going to look at the market? What is the market? You should format string so that way the self dot things aren't in one big line. Yep, that's fair enough. So this is one way of doing that. You could also do this. Kind of formatting is kind of subjective in how you like it laid out. I think I would prefer something like this where you can see you're formatting your name, your skill, and your salary, and those variables are name, skill, and salary. Kind of makes sense to me. Hopefully that looks a bit better. You're right, it didn't look that great before. There's a really great talk by, oh god, who is it? It's like Raymond Hettinger or one of them, who talks about Pep 8 and kind of the good bits and the bad bits of Pep 8. Which I'll have to find and link one day because it's quite good. Alright, where was I? Right, so we want to see all the players that are available on the market. So what players are available on the market? Let's find out. Teams. Players. What we're going to do here is instead of just having the set teams, we're just going to pass the teams and the players into here. So these players are the unlisted players. And what that means here is instead of doing this, we can just say for player in self.team.league, self.league.players. So all the players that are available in the league and aren't hired by a team, we can then do that. Let's give that a shot. So if you're in the players on the market, built-in function print. Print. All right, we probably want to print the player instead. Right, so these are all the players that are available on the market. Now we can kind of look at these and say, hey, which ones are going to be good, which ones are going to be bad. I don't know which ones are going to be good and which ones are going to be bad. This is kind of an interesting thing because all their salaries are correlated to their skill. So we should probably add some randomization into here, so you kind of have to search through a bit for talent and do stuff like that. But that's pretty easily controllable because we've just made their salary and their skill things that we can control here and here, right? So you can kind of see it's going to be pretty easy to change how much randomness is in the salary. Cool, nice. Right. Now, just looking at the formatting of this, printing name before each one of them doesn't look very good. So let's get rid of that. Do. Cool. So here's a list of all the players in the league that aren't signed to any team. So we can look at our team players. I think it's going to be useful if we also print out what our current salary for each week is. So what is our weekly salary? Small suggestion, you could also add a space after the double colon next to make selection, makes it easier, read the number option that the players have to use. That's 100% correct. So let's make a function that finds out how much this team is paying in weekly salary instead of just taking away from our money. Salary plus equals return. And now, for pay players, we just have to do self.money minus equals self.weekly salary. So all we're doing here is we're pushing the counting logic of how much salary do we have to pay away from the actual payment logic. So that way we can use this function over here to say print your team salary is, boom, a week. Self.team.weekly salary. Boom. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're calculating how much our weekly salary is going to be. None type has no thing format. Whoops. Yeah, daisies. Right. So we're paying $116,000 a week, which is probably a bit high. So, what can we do to change that? So we look at our team players and we can see that our most expensive player is costing us 14 grand a week. Holy crap. And we could probably trade him for someone on the market who's a little bit cheaper. So what do we want to do? So if we look at the market, we can see that. Now, what if we wanted to make a trade? We want to make a trade for someone that's on the market with our player, right? That's kind of the most basic operation that we can do as a manager. So let's go view players. So when we're doing view players, instead of just looking at all the players, let's add a submenu where we can say, hey, do you want to trade for any of these players? Right, so 1 is going to be trade player and 2 is going to be finish. So kind of what we want to be doing here is using this same menu selection logic that we used up here, but just with a different menu with different selection items, right? So what's the easy way to do that is probably going to be to pull this into a function, which is just going to be like a generic, follow actions function. I like pulling common functionality like this, like, hey, menu selection code into a helpers file or something similar like that, where you kind of can reuse code and see what happens. Select from menu. Right, so what do we need to select from a menu? We need a menu options dictionary, which we're going to pass in. Now the cool thing about Python 3 or 3.5, which is what I'm using, is that we can do what is the type of each variable, and you can kind of annotate the types here, which allows us to see what's being passed in. So instead of calling it a menu options dict, we can just call it menu options and know that it's going to be a dict based on the type. It might be cool to add some randomization to the market. You could regenerate the market after each round. Yeah, definitely. So I think the thing to do, which is going to make this a little bit more interesting, is add some randomization, and then make it so that when we're, you have probably having like a weekly performance thing or something where, if you win a game, you're, not performance, attitude or, something similar to that, right? So if you win a game, then your players feel happier. And so if you're losing a lot, you might want to get rid of some of the people that are really sad and trade them for people that are a bit happier. That is really damn cool. I didn't know that. I assume you're talking about the function annotation stuff. Yeah, it's only in 3.5 and up. It's really, really cool. I find it very handy a lot of the time. And it's pretty extensible. So you can say, hey, if you're passing in like a list, you can say you're passing an A, which is a list of integers, or it might be a list of teams, right? And so you can kind of pretty easily say what you're passing in, and it helps in PyCharm because that it can then use that to help do its autocomplete logic. So it doesn't actually have any effect on the running of the program. So if you pass in the wrong thing, it's not going to buzz you or anything. It'll let you do it. But it's just kind of like a code thing that makes it a bit easier to tell what the programmer is trying to do. Is this project game text-based? I mean, it is at the moment. I don't know. I guess it's... Like I said, I kind of started this and said, hey, let's see where I can get in 2 or 3 hours and then see if, it seems like it'll be fun to kind of continue to develop it. We're around an hour and a half in, an hour and 40 minutes in. I think we're going pretty well, but it is text-based at the moment. Ideally, if I spent more time on this, it would become non-text-based. And, the cool thing about what this is doing is that the text-based stuff is going to be pretty easy to rip out and replace with, if you want to do like a graphics-based version of it. Yeah, so not limited by that. Cool. So select from menu. Here are your menu options. Make selection. Do some dodgy things. So from your menu options, print invalid selection. Else do the action. Nice. I need to read Python changelogs more often. I've been taking a look at Python 3.6 changelog. Python 3.6 had me really excited. It does for me too. So the thing that Python 3.6 is adding, which Python 3.5 doesn't have, is these are argument annotations, function annotations, if you will. You can also do things now where you can do, in 3.6, you'll be able to do variable annotations. So you'll be able to kind of annotate a variable and say that it is a int or a list of ints or whatever, instead of just when you're passing it through as a function parameter. As well as some other cool things in 3.6, but it's not out yet as far as it's not officially launched. Although I think the new PyCharm version is going to have 3.6 support when that comes out. Anyway, okay, self.print menu, select from menu, self.inputs. Yeah, nice. Okay, so that should work. And all you have to do is pass in a dictionary where you have input mapping to function handles. So in our dodgy function down here where we're viewing players or we're viewing the market, actually I probably want to put this in the market. Yeah, I guess it doesn't really matter. Let's put it in the market. So let's say that our inputs here are going to be 1 are going to be trade players, and 2 is going to be finish or something. Yeah, well, 2016-3 will have Python 3.6 support. Yeah, that's awesome. The early access doesn't have it all. Yeah. Bigger and bigger doesn't mean better and better in text-based games. It's looking complicated every minute. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is text-based. Oh, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, I'm probably planning to work on this around half an hour more, see where I can get with it, and yeah, see if I come back to it. Just have some fun coding and seeing what happens. Rock on. All right, let's go. So we got view market, inputs, blah, blah, blah. What do we want to do? All right, so really ignore this. We want 3 for this to be trade players. So what do we want trade players to be able to do is switch a player on your team for a free agent player. Hello, Case Wintry. I think you should come back to it. It's a really cool project and could turn into something really good. Yeah, thanks, Cameron. I hope so too. It's kind of going to be fun. Case Wintry. Unfortunately, there is no switch case statement in Python, for what it's worth. Alright. Switch a player from your team for a free agent. Cool. So what do we want this to do? So we kind of want to select... Let's get rid of this. We want you to, when you're trading players, we want you to select a player from your team. And then we want you to select a player from the free agents. Switch them. Right. So to select a player from your team, what do we want it to do? We actually want it to print out the players. So self.view players, and we want it to give it some menu options of, hey, which player do you want to switch, right? So input is, do you want to switch? Now, the easy way of doing this is going to be when we print the player, we want to give them a number, right? So that way we can refer to them as number 1 to 11 or something. Just so we can easily select which player, because we're doing it with a text-based input, right? So you can chain string formatting. So we're printing player here, right? Which is, if we look at the player print function, is also doing a format function. So you can kind of chain them and you can say, hey, I want the index of what this player is, and then I want the actual player information. Right? Where I is going to be the index of what the player is. So player 0 all the way up to player 10. So, all right, so we say that. So how do we get the index of what player this is? So this is kind of one of those weird Python specific things where the term is, the way you do that is by using the enumerate wrapper, I guess. So what you do is, instead of saying for player in self.league players, what you say is for players in the enumeration of this. And what this does is it gives you an index and then the players. And you can use this I as an index number. and you can enumerate through so it'll iterate through every one of these league players and put the player into this variable, and I'll put the index number into this variable I. Would you willing to be a GUI video for this project at some point? Yeah, look, if I continue it, it's kind of a interesting thing. So what I typically work on, what I've done all my streaming on in the past, is a NES emulator. NES being the old Nintendo Entertainment System. So that's a bit more of an advanced project, but doing a complete emulation of that. So I haven't worked on it for a couple of months, but back when I was working on it, we finished completely emulating the CPU, which was really cool. And I was just going to start working on the graphics side of that, so you could then load ROMs into that and play them. So I do plan on going back to that at some point. This is kind of my warm-up to get back into streaming, but yeah, I will probably continue making this game as well at some point. The reality is, probably instead of doing a GUI video, I'd probably create it using Django, which is a web framework, and then I'd turn it into a web-based game, which is quite well suited to something like this. I have some experience in Django, but just for a start, to kind of do a bit of a proof of concept, I think we'll do it this way and just do it with text, see where we can go with it. But I would like to come back and do this probably as a web project, so then potentially we could put it up somewhere and people could actually play it, which is the purpose of programming, right? So people can use it. Right, so trade players. View your players. Trade players. So trade players, what it should do at the moment is say which player do you want to switch, and it will print out all the players with an index of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And we can kind of see we've got some pretty expensive players. Will this be published on GitHub at any point? Yeah, sure. So all my code that I do on this stream gets published to I think it's GitHub/PyAndy at a guess. It's linked at like the bottom of the Twitch page. All the videos I do here are put on the YouTube, automatically uploaded to YouTube, and the code goes up to GitHub. So yes, this will be available on GitHub. And you can go on there and you can check out the NES emulator code if you want to check out something cool as well. That's a bigger code base though. I kind of was working on that for a couple of months, so it is a reasonably complicated project. What are the benefits of using a dict with numbered indexes? So funny you should ask that, case when true. The answer is Python doesn't have a switch statement, which is, I assume, what your name is based off, is case when true. So there's no switch or case statement in Python. So if you want to switch between lots of options and say, hey, was the number entered, was it 1 or was it 2 or was it 3? The only real way to do that is an if, else if, so on and so forth. The alternative to that, and the Pythonic way to doing that, is using a dictionary. So because Python has really nice dictionaries where you can map to functions, since functions are first-class objects, you don't have to do what you'd have to do in like a C++ or something, where you'd have to say, hey, did that number equal 1? If it equaled 1, call this function. Or if it equaled 2, call this function, right? What I do instead is just say, hey, map it to this dictionary, and if it doesn't meet any of these, then it's not valid. And if it does, then call the function that's referred to in here. So it just really allows me to cut out, really simply do like a switch statement without having a switch statement in the language. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Yeah, that's the thought process anyway. Cool. Okay. Rock on. Cool. So which player do we want to switch? And then we'll do which player do you want to hire? So instead of viewing the players, we'll want to view the market now. And then switch them. So player index equals this. Market index equals this. Now we're going to assume that we're getting valid input here because, you know, why not? Switch them. We'll do that. Print. Switching this for this. So self.team.players player index. So we're switching him for self.league.players market index. Right. Oh, nice. All right. So what have we got here? Okay. Right, okay. Let's see what happens here. You know, we have to enter a proper int, but you know, we're adults, we can do that. We want to trade some players. So we look at our thing and we say, we're paying $130,000 a week, which is a lot of money, right? And let's say that we want to get that down. So we're going to pick out some of our more expensive players. So Amelia Emma is number 4, and she's being paid $14,000 a week. And we say, hey, that's outrageous. Let's get rid of her. So we pick number 4. I'm going to take the advice from earlier. I'm going to format this a bit nicer. And then we say, all right, who do we want to trade her first? So this is all the free market agents. We want to say trade her someone that's a bit cheaper. So let's say 16, Benjamin James, who's going to only be paid $8,600 a week. Benjamin James, where was he? I've completely lost him. There we go, 16. Right, so we say, hey, we're switching Amelia Emma for Benjamin James. Cool. Now, we didn't actually make that switch yet, but we can see that the UI for doing that is ready to go. Whoop. All right. You should add a question mark and a space to the higher. Yeah. No, I'm learning. Switching that for that. All right. So now that we've actually said that, we actually want to switch these two players. All right. So we want self.team.players.remove. I always forget how to do Python list indexing. Python remove at index. So the good thing about, you know, not knowing something is that there's always a pretty easy way to just Google it and do this. Del. I don't really want to del. I want to pop. There we go. Cool. Cool. So we want to remove that player from the team. Player from team equals this player. And then we want to get the player from the market. Dot pop. And then we want to add them to their respective places. So players dot append player from market. So I want to add the player from the market to the team players, and we want to add the player that was previously on the team to the market player from team. There we go, switched. Right, so let's look at our players on the team. So let's switch number 9, Isabel Olivia, who we pay $14,000 a week. And let's switch her for someone slightly cheaper. for Mia Ethan, who gets paid 96,000, number 30. So we've switched Isabella Olivia for Mia Ethan. So now if we look at our team players, we should no longer have an Isabella, and we should have an Mia Ethan instead, which we do. And Isabella Olivia should be back on the market. Shit. Wrong input. There we go. Anyway, proved that it worked. All right. Cool. So now we've got a way to trade players, and we can do this. So let's put in a little bit of randomization. Let's put in some prize money if we win. What up? Desquilla. And you know, that's kind of, we've got ourselves the basis of the game. And then we can, you know, depending on whether we're winning or not, we can do that. All right, so the home team won. We want to give the home team some money. How much money? A random amount of money. So if the home team won, money plus equals, you know, whatever, 10,000. Away team money. So let's say we get paid somewhere between, if we win, so we want to win, we get paid 100,000, somewhere between 200,000 and $0. So random.random will return a number between 0 and 1. So this will return somewhere between 0 and $200,000. You got some heavy rubber duck programming going on, except just Twitch chat programming. Yeah, that's pretty much what I do. Welcome. It's kind of fun. I tend to just try and talk out my thought process of what I'm doing as I'm doing it. And hopefully that gives a, you know, reasonable experience to the people that are watching. You tell me, I suppose. Away team. Cool. So we're now going to get some money when we win. Awesome. What we do want is, now that we're getting money if we win, we have an incentive to win, we have an incentive to invest in better players. So let's see. So we're West Ham, we're 586, we've got $1 million, and we're paying $113,000 a week. So that's a reasonably high salary. So let's just play the next round and see if we win or lose. We didn't win, so we lost money. When you have children, talk out your programming to them instead of put them straight to sleep. I'll choose to take that as a compliment to Squilla. And yeah, play the next round. We've won. Okay, so we're losing all our games. So we're running out of money. We're going to need to invest in some better players. So let's trade some players. Let's get rid of some of these drop kicks and get some better guys. Let's get rid of Luke Ethan and trade him for someone that's pretty good. Logan Lamb. And let's trade Arvin Mia for 24. Right, okay. So we have a lot of a better team now. So let's play the next round. We won a game. And we have 724,000. Should probably round how much money we get, which is a very reasonable point. So in Python, again, the math library, maybe not. No, round is an inbuilt function. There you go. Who knew? So round will round it to the nearest round number. I think your webcam is going rip. It's glitching with a blue background every now and then. Interesting. Luke Ethan is one entitled for later. Yeah, fuck that guy. We'll get rid of him. I don't know what to do about that. Is the rest of the stream fine? Is it just the webcam? I mean, I can just do that and see if that works. Webcam. Nope, I appear to have nuked my webcam. Let's see if I can add it back. OBS, alright. No, webcam. All right. Webcam is dead. Dream is dead. Everything's gone mine. All right, I'll plug. I have a different webcam. Let me plug that in and see if that's working. If it doesn't, then the webcam dream might be dead. Nope. Okay. Alright. Well, that's unfortunate, but I guess we'll persevere. We don't need no stinking webcam. Alright. No, alright. My bad. Webcam gone. Alright, well, I'll keep going. I'm probably going to be ending up in around 20 minutes anyway, so it's not the end of the world if I can't get it going. Alright, where were we? It does feel weird doing this without a webcam, you know? Thank you, CJ Collector. Thanks for coming along and watching. Alright, cool. So we earn some money now. If we come back to here, we can see that our team salary is 125 grand a week. Alright, so we're probably going to start winning games now, but our salary is probably too high. 724. Oh no, 793. Yeah, it's not so bad. OBS is a pain in the butt sometimes. Yep, I completely agree. Hello, Oliver. I would greet you visually, but I have just nuked my webcam. So, hello from the audio side of things. All right, cool. So we've now got, you make money, you can trade for players, and you will, win or lose games. So obviously this is pretty bare bones. You can kind of tell that all the numbers are just made up. There's no real randomization beyond, the player skill being kind of correlated to the salary. So I'd kind of uncorrelate that. So you got to set up better players. You could pretty easily add in stuff like mood of players and so on, and then positions, and then actually playing the games. So I think that the future of this, if I did come back to it, is probably going to be putting it on the web and doing it with Django. So you could, do it that way, which is a pretty natural fit for this kind of game. But yeah, just kind of wanted to prove what you can do in 2 hours with Python. So I think, to be honest, this is probably going to be around the point where I leave it, given that we're around 2 hours in and we have something where you can trade players, you can view the market, and you can play a season out and win or lose money. And my webcam has stopped working, which is unfortunate, and so I'm gonna no, can't get it working. No. I think I'm gonna call it reasonably quits there. I'm gonna put all this code up on GitHub if anyone wants to look at it. Wouldn't advise using any of it in production code or anything. But just as a cool example of what's possible in Python in around 2 hours. And why I think Python is awesome. So, for those of you that have kind of come in from the end, let's walk through, just quickly what this thing is. Yeah, thanks a lot, Cameron. Glad you did. It was fun. So we have a pretty simple football manager type game. You have multiple teams that play each week. You manage one of the teams. You have 11 players on a team, and you can kind of pick and choose what trades to make. The games get played. Players make up a team. So you have 11 players on a team that all have a different skill rating and salary. And basically every week you will have a team that will play a game. It has a skill rating, and that's who determines who wins. You have to play a salary. The league keeps track of who is winning and losing and what the ladder of the game is. And yeah, you win or lose money, and you have to pay salaries. You can trade players, stuff like this. So hopefully it's given a good insight. Thank you very much, Avatar and Cameron. Really enjoyed this. Thanks. Are these videos archived anywhere? Yes, they are. So I have a YouTube channel which is kind of linked at the bottom of the Twitch page. And basically I just use the Twitch auto upload to YouTube feature. So that'll be up there in, a couple of hours or something whenever it gets ported across. So yeah, I do a regular series, or I used to. I haven't done it in a while. This is me just coming back and trying to get back into streaming. If Andy approved Python equals true. Oh man, that's some. Where's your pepeta at the squealer? YouTube and the code is archived on GitHub. That is correct. See, yeah, thanks for coming and watching, KS1 True. Code is put on. Yeah, so I do a regular series on doing a NES emulator in Python, which is pretty fun. I haven't done it for a couple of months, but I was doing it around twice a week. I'll be hoping to get back into some of that habit. If you want to check out some more fun code or some other stuff that I've done, all the videos of me creating a NES emulator from scratch using Python 3.5 are on, GitHub and YouTube and all that stuff. And that's what I've been working on for a while, and probably what I'll keep going back to work on, because that's kind of my big end goal, is to have a working NES emulator. It's a really fun project. So if you want to learn some stuff about how not only programming, but how consoles work, or used to work, I guess. So about learning assembly language, which is the code that the CPU actually reads, and how a simple CPU worked 20, 30 years ago. That's about creating a CPU from scratch, going to be moving into creating the equivalent of their graphics card, emulating that from scratch, and just discussing some of those ideas from first concept. I tried to do a bit of, more explanation in that of not only what I'm doing, but what the concept behind a CPU is and how it all works together and stuff. Anyway, I'll end my pitch there. Thank you very much for everyone for coming and watching. I will put this video up on YouTube. I'll put this code up on GitHub. They are linked at the bottom. And yeah, thank you very much, the people that have been here chatting throughout the day. It's Cameron and Avatar, the Squealer, Case Went True. It's been pretty good. CGI Collector, who is here. Skullmaker. Focus Whip. Yeah, it's been awesome. I give you my squeal blessing on your anti-programming endeavors. Thank you very much to Squealer. I will print that and put that on my wall. And yeah, I'll be back sometime soon. I may continue this. If I do, I'll probably turn it into a Django project, like I said. This was just like a bit of a proof of concept, like I said, for what you can do in around 2 hours in Python. And yeah, make it fun. Or I'll be going back to my NES emulator. The stream is ending. Sorry, Oliver. Yeah, it will be up on YouTube pretty soon, and I have my older videos on the NES emulator, which are pretty interesting as well, I think, on YouTube. So, but you don't get to interact with me, which we all know is the best part, with my charming personality. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so thanks for coming along, everybody. I'll see you next time. I'll get my webcam working again, which will be fun. Hopefully. Thank you very much. See you, everybody.